Nadat mijn hoogbegaafde zoon met schooltrauma was uitgevallen op het basisonderwijs en hierdoor een van de duizenden thuiszitters werd die Nederland rijk is, verslond ik alles wat ik over hoogbegaafdheid kon vinden. Want hoewel hoogbegaafdheid heel veel mooie kanten kent, kunnen onze kinderen het toch soms knap lastig hebben. Uiteindelijk besloten wij als gezin dat wij de kennis en ervaringen die wij hadden opgedaan wilden delen met andere ouders en leerkrachten, zodat de reis voor hen iets makkelijker zou worden. We doen dit via het boek Een Intense Reis, maar ook via deze podcast, waarin deskundigen op het gebied van begaafdheid hun kennis delen, want samen komen we verder. Dit is Een Intense Reis, de podcast, en mijn naam is Marije Hoefland.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad that everyone is listening again today, and today's episode will be in English again because I have a very special guest all the way from Canada. Eric, I'm so glad that you're here today and that we're able to record this podcast together. My guest today is Eric Windhorst. Eric is a registered psychotherapist, counselor, coach, and mentor who specializes in serving the neurodivergent, outside of the box folks who identify, for example, as complex, creative, gifted, intense, and highly sensitive. And while he helps clients with a variety of challenges, Eric is particularly passionate about working with individuals, navigating through periods of significant personal growth, life transitions, existential searching, and shifts in identity. Eric works holistically and eclectically, helping his clients connect with their inner nature, so their true, deep, authentic selves and outer nature. And that's like the wider, the even more than human worlds, in order to promote their healing and growth. Eric, thank you. I'm so happy that we can have this conversation today. And before we...
thanks for inviting me, Maria.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Before we started, when we were preparing this podcast, I already shared a short story about a role that you played in my life without you even knowing about that at the time. And the people who listen to this podcast, some of them may know that a couple of years ago, I've been diagnosed with breast cancer, and everything is going well now. But I remember that because, of having cancer and everything that happened in my life, I was going through a period of disintegration and asking, these life questions. And I remember that I was, basically searching for answers, whether the way that I experienced my giftedness and the way that I experienced nature and my spirituality, I somehow felt that it was all connected, that it was not just those standalone things, but they were all connected. And I remember that one time I was in the hospital and I was listening to my favorite podcast, which is, as people know, which is the Positive Disintegration podcast. Yeah, of course, Emma. And you were a guest there as well. And I remember you talking about the greenhouse and how the energy that you were experiencing while working in that greenhouse basically helped you get through like difficult times in your life. And you were talking about that energy in such a way that it just, it really touched me, and it made me like cry, because at that point I was still asking questions like, is it weird, the way that I experience that energy with nature, and that it can really help me through it, and I can really basically absorb the energy that plants have. And you were talking about that. I'm like, no, this is part of it, and I'm not crazy, and this is something that I should embrace and explore further. So thank you for making that happen for me, and playing a part of my life, because I think, that comment, you talking about that greenhouse, is actually one of the reasons that I
Wow.
started to explore this further. So thank you.
Oh my. Yeah. I mean, thank you. Thank you. It's very meaningful for you to share that. And I feel, yeah, I feel like I just want to cry, quite frankly, because, yeah, the path, the journeys that we're all on, they're interconnected with other people's journeys. And this is an example of the entanglement, I think, of the world, and how when we, and this is going back more than a year ago now that I was on that podcast, and I
Mm-hmm.
was still feeling at that time pretty insecure, much more insecure than now about yeah, energy work, or shamanistic kind of experiences, or these experiences with nature that I've had off and on throughout my life. And I really felt like I was kind of coming out of the closet, in a sense, on that podcast. And so it was quite, I mean, in some ways I felt compelled by my own kind of spirit guides to share things. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, from an ego perspective, I felt like this is like pretty out there, and I felt like, are there going to be like consequences professionally? Like this stuff is not, scientifically and empirically kind of talked about. It's kind of looked down upon. Um, and since that time, my journey has continued, and I continued working, doing energy work practices, and I'm mentored by my friend Chris with that. Um, and this whole kind of process really started for me when I had an encounter with a shaman.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really interesting circumstance. She's actually she's Dutch, and she had actually come to me to work in a coaching capacity, to work on being highly sensitive and intense and empathic. Um, and we met each other, and I remember feeling like very uncomfortable around this person. It was as if like she could just see me, like just see
Yeah.
me like right to my soul. And I was like, I didn't know what to do with it at the time. I felt very uncomfortable. So somewhat ironically, I ended up working with her. Um, and she was like really the first person in my life who I think saw me better than I could see myself, saw things about me which I had hidden, things that I had shut down, propensities that I have that I'm now developing, that I could grow into. And just meeting this person and her energy, it shocked me alive. It just awakened something within me, and that was about a year and a half ago. And so since that time, this whole process has been unfolding in kind of linear time, and I've been developing these practices for myself as an individual, and I do work practices, throughout the day, all day. Uh, and my sensitivity to energy, my sensitivity to people, my sensitivity to my clients, my understanding of what's happening with a person, is just gaining in acuity. And then I'm also kind of bringing some of this into my therapeutic work as well, with clients as well, introducing them to some of these concepts, teaching them some practices and exercises, and it has profound impacts. And so I've had too many experiences now, where the rational part of me, the academic part, which I had very strongly developed for a
Mm-hmm.
whole slew of reasons, including defense mechanisms, including being very intelligent, including being a man, uh, all of these ways that I was just in my mind, in my brain. Uh, I did, a lot of postgraduate study, academic study, published papers, did all that type of stuff. And it was like the whole time, in retrospect, the whole time I was chasing this experience of this interconnectedness with nature, except I was doing it through the wrong lens. And it
Yeah.
wasn't the wrong lens at the time. It was the wrong lens, for me. It was like, I couldn't quite surrender to what my experience truly was, because it terrified me. It was powerful. And it was so outside of the norm, outside of the Christian norm that I was brought up in, inside of being a man, inside of being intelligent. Like all of these factors kind of kept it at bay. Anyway, and it turns out in retrospect, and I'll stop talking because I'll just keep on going on. But in retrospect, it turns out that like I kind of had to do all this academic kind of rigor stuff because it makes me seem like I'm more reputable. So I can talk about some of these things that are a little bit more out there, and people see, oh, he has a PhD. He must kind of be, and it's like, well, not really, but that's kind of the way our world works. And so I think it opens doors for me, and my guides tell me it's like you had to kind of go through this so that now more people will be able to listen to what you have to say. And that's kind of where I'm at in my journey. And I just, I need to continue. I don't really have a choice. I could try to stop things, but when I stop things, I'm miserable. If I keep on going, at times I'm miserable, but at times it's like I have these profound moments of peace and growth, and I'm just committed at this point to just continuing that. So yeah, I'll leave it there so you can ask some
Beautiful.
questions. I apologize.
Yeah, beautiful. You already said that when you were having the talk on the podcast with Chris and Emma, that was basically the start of you, basically like a coming out, and you were still feeling quite conscious about that.
Oh yeah.
What kind of responses did you get
That's a good
from
question.
the people around you?
Mostly not the ones I expected. Yeah, so my fear-based kind of assumption was that people are going to think I'm a wacko.
Yeah.
And as a healthcare professional too, that there would be kind of, I don't know, people would start saying things or spreading things, and I felt very insecure about that. It turns out the response actually was, at least the ones that I heard, and perhaps there's some other ones there too, but it was very positive. And it was like almost everybody was kind of saying to me, thank you so much for kind of sharing this, because I have this experience too. And I thought I was the only one. And I have clients coming to me now who said, oh, I heard you on this podcast. It's like, I'm gifted, but I'm very sensitive, and I have these kind of energetic experiences. But I kind of feel like I have to hide them because they're so outside of the norm of what is considered consensus reality at this point. And it inspired them to kind of like reach out to me, or it inspired them to validate their experience. So me taking that risk for myself had effects of allowing other people to take risks for themselves. And I think that's what this whole life journey is really about. When we boil it down as humans, we're all growing according to kind of like what we were kind of created to be, or what our souls want us to be. And hopefully the environment allows that to happen. For a lot of people, it doesn't. And I just see like we're all kind of walking each other home. That's really, and yeah, that's just the way I kind of see things at this point. So anyways, my brain's doing my little brain fart thing. So I'm going to just stop talking again. Ask a question.
No, I love to hear you talk. So let your brain fart all day. I don't mind.
Okay.
I don't mind. One of the things that came to mind while you were talking is I told you about the questions I was asking about being gifted, the way we experience nature, the way we experience energy, spirituality, and that I felt like there was a connection there. And you just mentioned, the people who reach out to you are also like gifted people experiencing the things that you talk about in these podcasts. Do you feel there's a connection between aspects of our gifted self and the way we do experience energy, the world, being intuitive, the connections we feel?
Yes. So that's a really good question. And I think there's definitely an overlap between, or maybe I'll put it this way. So I've done a lot of work with Intergifted as an organization. You're probably familiar with
Hmm.
them as well. And
Yes.
so Jennifer Harvey-Salin, who's the founder of Intergifted, she has a certain model of giftedness. She talks about different areas of overexcitability, different areas of intelligence. And
Hmm.
so my felt sense, or my intuitive sense, I don't have hard empirical data on this, is that there's certain types of gifted people, like a certain kind of subset of the gifted population, perhaps, that are like very high in kind of maybe emotional, maybe sensual, energetic kind of sensitivity, and often very
Hmm.
existential as well, existential, emotional, energy sensitivity. And so I
Hmm.
think there's a subset of the gifted population that often gets missed by a lot of conventional kind of assessments, whether they're more kind of IQ test types of things, or qualitative assessments, because this experience, right? This permeability, this energy sensitivity, um, is not really part of common parlance. And so why would it be included in a lot of assessments when it's still seen as, it's not seen as like not a valid way of being human? It's just not a common thing to talk about. Like, energy sensitivity, shamanistic kind of practices and what, and we'll talk about a bit about that as well.
Hmm.
A lot of this has been lost through the history of Western civilization, right? Probably we have to go back to prior to the agricultural revolution, like before everything started getting domesticated. The shamanistic way of life, which is, it's a way of living in harmony and balance, right? In harmony and balance internally, in harmony and balance amongst other people, and in harmony and balance with the wider natural world. It's all these layers of relationship and balance. And the shamanistic perspective that everything is interconnected, and that we can get out of balance, and that sometimes we need help to kind of refine ourselves and find our soul, or we need to kind of go on vision quests to identify what's true for us. All of these things kept us alive as human beings for 99% probably of our history, something around there.
Yeah.
And most of that's been thrown out the window. It's just been thrown out the window, both intentionally through, like the Crusades, and through the witch hunt, and through the sky religion of Christianity. And Christianity has done some wonderful things as well, but it's a one, from a shamanistic perspective, it's very one-sided. It's all focused on heaven and escaping kind of the suffering of the world. And the shamanistic perspective is that's only one layer of reality. That's the upper world. But we also, the middle world, the world of our relationships, the world of our interconnectedness with nature, is a very important part of what it means to be human. And to bypass that means we destroy it, and we destroy ourselves, and we destroy each other. And then even more so, the lower world that shamans refer to, it's where our souls are found. And our souls
Mhm.
being that inner, I talk about inner nature. Different practitioners like Jung talked about the individuation process. Dabrowski talks about the personality ideal, and the third factor, which I think are both actually situated in the soul and then become kind of more consciously kind of integrated. That part of what it means to be human is the part that's been most lost, I think, in a lot of westernized psychologies and westernized civilizations. Um, and so most of us are kind of walking around as only being partly human. We don't even know what we're missing. And so when it comes back to the giftedness and the energy sensitivity and all of this, it's like, well, of course that we're not talking about this and having assessments for it, or kind of characterizing people, getting them maybe the assistance that they need or the guidance that they need, because this has been lost purposefully and unintentionally through thousands of years. My sense is it's emerging, and it has been over the past couple of decades. I mean, for goodness sake, if I was to go 2 years ago and somebody was going to tell me I was going to be on a podcast talking about energy, I would think, like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, that's crazy shit. That's stupid. Like, that's there's no proof of that. That's crazy. And that denial was a denial of myself at the same time. And I didn't even know that I was denying myself. And so to answer your question, yes, I do believe that there's a segment of the gifted population that has a certain kind of cognitive, emotional, energy sensitive profile, and that they experience things in a characteristically different way than a lot of other gifted people, but also than the kind of neuro majority as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my sense at this point. So
Yeah. I'm thinking if you talk about that subset of gifted people
mhm.
and the way that we live in a society where things like energy and intuition are often, I'm going to say judged, because people
Oh
are
yeah,
going to say,
harshly.
it's not real and everything should be scientifically proven. And even if you try and do that, then they're going to find flaws in the research that's being done, etc.
Yes.
I was talking about this with Jennifer as well,
Oh, interesting.
and also with other people, because I think if you have like this subset of gifted people, and as we know that one of Jennifer's subjects is also that gifted trauma, and the
Yes.
way that you feel different, and when we talk
Mm.
about this subset of gifted people, I think there can be even like more gifted trauma and more feelings of disintegration, because you already feel as a gifted individual, you may already feel
Outsider.
different and an outsider compared to
Yeah.
anyone else. But if you also have this strong spiritual side, and the sensitivity to energy, which maybe, being part of the gifted community, you just want to push away and deny, it probably makes you even more vulnerable to experience things like gifted trauma, because basically you don't fit in, with the norm
Yeah.
of that other
Yeah.
group as well. Or maybe you think you do, because I've got the same
Yep.
experience that you're having.
Mhm.
When I was coming out and when I was going to talk about my experiences, my spiritual experience, the way I experience energy and
Mhm.
stuff like that, almost every conversation I would have afterwards with a gifted person, they would address me like, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're talking
Mm.
about that, because I'm experiencing the same thing." So I'm
Yes.
just wondering, how big is this subset of gifted people? Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are just denying it and pushing that part of
Uh-huh.
themselves away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like you did as well. And now you're embracing it, and now it can
Yeah. I mean,
develop. And
yes.
yeah,
I think those are very, yeah, great points. Like, so even with the sense that there's probably a subset, like how
yeah,
big is that subset? Because so many of us, again, you know, collective trauma, personal trauma, gender-based trauma. I mean, you could go on and on. How many people have just eradicated this aspect of their experience from consciousness, or hide it consciously, or just repressed it, and they don't even realize that it's there anymore. Like how many, and what, I mean, I think you make a very good point, and maybe there's a lot more people who have the potential for this experience, and it's been squashed or been even further underdeveloped. And then even zooming out to humanity as a whole, like even apart from like the gifted population, there's probably, I think we all have a capacity for some type of energy sensitivity. I think it's probably somewhat of a bell curve of kind
hmm
of intensity or sensitivity to things. But I think there's so much unharnessed experience and potential. And my strong felt sense, and I know I'm not alone with this, is that most of us, I mean, all of us to some extent, most of us are walking around as very fragmented and very dissociated and very compartmentalized people. And so, you know, going back to this coming out process on that podcast, I think part of what I was feeling was my own kind of insecurity, but I think I'm also feeling the collective shame around this, or kind of even anticipating that people who have this experience might even like lash out at me, because if we don't want to see something in ourselves, because we've had to kind of hide it, oftentimes we will reject it in other people. And so I think there's a lot at play in that dynamic. So going back to your question, your statement, I think probably there's a lot more people than I mean, a lot more gifted people who have these sensitivities and this ability to sense energy, to read energy. And the amazing thing is, and something that I'm developing, is being able to work with energy. And my, oh my, it can be very powerful in ways that are just beyond kind of my rational brain's scientific comprehension. And so there's almost a bit of an ethical and a moral imperative to continue for myself on this path and developing it and sharing it with others and sharing it with other therapists as well, and other healthcare professionals, because this is an aspect of what it means to be human. And if we're not addressing it, and my sense is that, you know, everything's energy, right? Everything is energy. We know that from quantum physics. We know that from shamanistic worldview. And for most of human history, certain people, much more than now, were able to actually work with that energy and shift that energy. So if somebody is traumatized, right? And I talked about this at my SANG presentation with Inga. Oh crap, I'm gonna just butcher her last name, but everybody, we all love Inga. And just talking about how people can spend a decade in trauma therapy, right? Say they have complex trauma, maybe gifted trauma. You can spend a decade and really still be struggling with symptoms. And not to say that the energy perspective is going to just solve everybody's problems, but it's this component of healing. And Inga experienced this, where in kind of healing at the energetic level, it kind of accelerated the healing process at the physical and the psychological level, because the energy is what the other components are made of. So if you can shift things at that kind of core level, everything above it kind of like tectonic shifts, everything above it shifts. And it can, for some people, I don't think for everybody, it's not like a magic bullet, and we have to be careful anytime I think we just grab onto these like single solutions, because that's part of this rational way of thinking, which is problematic. It holds a potential for many people who've had no success with conventional therapy, have treatment-resistant disorders and things like that, and really have to have their experience validated and be able to heal some of these energetic imbalances inside them. I mean, I've seen people just transform. I've seen people who, like, literally their problem that has been haunting them for years and years and years, it's just gone. And again, the scientific psychological explanation, it can't comprehend what's happening there. But if this is a possibility, and it is, we need to be for those of us with these giftings. I want to say we need to be. I don't mean to be like forcing people to do things, but there's a compulsion within me and my own kind of soul's calling of like, no, this is important. Okay. And we need to, and I need to, even if it makes me uncomfortable, I need to develop this and try to integrate it into these other healing frameworks. And that's kind of the journey that I'm on now, is kind of bringing together the psychological, which is very powerful and beneficial in a lot of ways, like understanding our family of origin, understanding like emotional dynamics. Like most of us have some type of trauma that we're carrying, and the psychological tools can be powerful, but they often don't address the bigger existential questions. They often don't address the sense of feeling like you're here for a purpose, and that the way that the world is makes no sense, and you can't fit in a way that makes any coherent sense, and all the pathways everybody else is talking about just seem like gibberish to you, and you're thinking, well, there has to, like, what's the point of living then? And that's where the energy perspectives and the shamanistic perspectives come in and provide wisdom and guidance and healing for those people whose experience is so far outside of the norm. And I'll stop because I'm going to just keep on going again. So
Yeah,
yes.
you're talking about using like shamanistic practices and energy work within your counseling, within your therapeutic practice.
Mhm.
And I feel you, because I know that from personal experiences, once I started embracing this, and once I felt like
Yeah.
at first there were like these blockages inside of me, so it wouldn't flow. But once I
Yes.
started embracing it and it would flow, um, I I feel like my trauma is gone. I feel like there were places within my system,
Mhm.
and there was like this place, and I would call it my, my leeg, which is called my empty, and it would feel like an empty desert, and I would spend so much time there. And
Mm.
after I started, you know,
Yes.
going on this spiritual quest, and basically it even felt like getting back the parts of my soul, my inner being that I lost. I
Yes.
have not been there since.
Mhm.
And before that, I would be there like for weeks at a time, like a
Yeah.
personal prison. And now it's like I
It's
don't
gone.
need that place anymore. It's gone. And I feel
Mhm.
connected, not alone in that prison, but connected to everything that's out there. And that's
Mhm.
so that feels so warm and so loving, to have that
Mhm.
feeling like you're never alone, like everything is connected. And to know that, and to
Yes.
have that flow, that's amazing. So I know
It
from
is.
personal experience that these practices can really help people get over their their traumas and develop as a person and feel more whole.
Yeah.
um, how do you use like the shamanic
Mhm.
practices and the energy work in your practice for the people who come to see you?
Yeah. So those are great questions. Before I go there, I kind of had a bit of an intuitive flash um, talking a little bit about. So when a person's very energy sensitive, and I would anticipate that you're a very energy sensitive person. It's just like
Mhm.
being a highly sensitive person, except to energy. And um, a friend of mine is so acutely energy sensitive. It's like he sees other beings around all of the time. It's like part of his experience of the world. And he went to conventional psychological treatment and was told he was in psychosis. And anyways, all of he was medicated. He had all of
Mhm.
these re-traumatizations about because his experience of reality did not fit into the paradigm. And so if you don't fit into the paradigm, um, psychosis is a real thing, but energy sensitivity and seeing other entities is not necessarily a psychosis. A psychosis is something you have no control over, and you're almost stuck in that state. And from a shamanistic perspective, a shaman is somebody who's able to enter into these other kind of realities, but also stay kind of grounded within their human experience. And so he was not helped at all by psychologists and psychiatry. He was further traumatized. And we've
Mhm.
talked a lot about this because I often have people coming to see me who have had very negative experiences in conventional psychotherapy. Often these are like highly sensitive and gifted folks as well. But and this is where some of the energy kind of perspectives become very important. When a person is very energy sensitive, if you use conventional psychotherapy to try to help them, you might actually make things worse.
Mm.
So I'll just give an example of this, of like, so when a person's very energy sensitive, it's like they can almost re-experience a situation or travel to a place, literally or figuratively, depending on one's worldview, and re-experience it. So one tool that I often use with my clients is I often talk about like doing inner child work, or kind of that, you know, that part of ourselves, that really sensitive, creative, often very intuitive and enthusiastic part that gets squashed through life experiences or through family experiences. And so there's a lot of conventional psychotherapeutic tools to do inner child work. Sometimes they don't work for an energy sensitive person at all, because they'll start going back to their memories of in their childhood and actually be re-experiencing them in real time in a way that it's not just like a flashback. It's like you're literally experiencing it. And so when you're working with energy, you can be healing the wounds, the energetic wounds that those experiences produced, and you're shifting the energy without going to the thoughts or even necessarily right to the emotions. And by shifting the energy of that person, that those traumas kind of dissipate. They might experience some of the emotions, like there might be a bit of a re-experiencing of some of the bodily emotions, but the second an energy sensitive person starts imagining something, they can be just re-experiencing it and getting re-traumatized. It's not necessarily therapeutic. So I just thought it was really
Yes.
kind of to mention that, because for those people who are listening who have maybe resonate with what we're talking about with energy sensitivity, and you've been like, you feel like there's no hope. Well, there is hope. It's just you're gonna have to. It's going to be somewhat hard to find in conventional treatment. So in terms of how I work with clients when it comes to energy work and shamanistic types of practices, so I have to be quite careful, because I am a registered health professional, and there's certain kind of ethical guidelines I have to follow and certain kind of evidence-based practices. And so I anticipate as probably time progresses and I integrate more of these things, I might have to leave some of the regulated profession, because whether it wants to or not, it forces a certain kind of way of being and doing and knowing. And at a
Yeah.
certain point, I would imagine it's going to be too constraining for me. So most of the work I do, like when it comes to incorporating energy work and shamanistic principles, it's more of like a psychoeducation. So it's providing practices and tools. I mean, one of the biggest things when you're energy sensitive, and when you're an energy sensitive therapist, is that your presence as a person is the most important piece of what you're doing with somebody. You're cultivating a certain atmosphere. You're grounding yourself. You're being present as who you are. You're being genuine. You're able to kind of almost create an atmosphere. And this is where my metaphor of the greenhouse comes in, where I worked in a greenhouse and it was very healing. But this idea of being a greenhouse is, well, what does a greenhouse do, right? Well, it provides a bit of a micro habitat inside of a larger habitat where the environmental conditions are optimized for growth. Well, what does it do? Well, it takes the sunlight in, and it keeps the heat in, and there's water and nutrients and other things that are kind of going on there. But the greenhouse isn't doing anything. The greenhouse is being something, right? The plants that are in there, they're going to grow. Like, plants want to grow, but sometimes they can't if they don't have the right nutrients, or if they're in a harsh kind of environment, or if they have some type of disease. And so my primary way of kind of incorporating these practices into my work is through continuing my own growth. And because everything is interconnected, it's changing the relational field with my clients. It's changing the relational field for the entire world in some ways. When we work on ourselves and we're kind of being in tune with ourselves, it's providing an opportunity for everybody else to have that experience as well. I think it's Rupert Sheldrake. He talks about morphogenetic resonance, and this idea that when there's an experience in one place, it opens up the possibility for that experience in other places. And so there's lots of ways to shift things. Sometimes that involves physically doing things and going out there and demonstrating, for example, when it comes to like social justice issues or environmental issues. And sometimes it's sitting quietly and being honest and being loving to yourself and being loving to another person. And that very act of love and connection is having ramifications like rippling out across space time in ways that we really don't fully understand. And so the possibility for change, change is it's always possible. There's always potential there. It's just that the worldview that so many of us have been indoctrinated with is like cause and effect, force, counterforce, linear progress.
I love how you
Yes.
in your answer you're also talking about, everything is connected, and how you
Yes.
also take that connection, like everything flows, everything is connected, how you take that to the way that you basically help people, because it's not like you're like refilling their energy, but you're making it flow for them. I mean, you're making it their process, but in a way it's also a collective process. So it just,
Yes, and there's
yeah.
something about the whole process which is mysterious, and we can talk about these things and we can put language on, but the second we put language on it, we're not really capturing it anymore, right? We're taking a snapshot. There's something mysterious that happens. I and I don't claim to fully under or even want to necessarily fully understand that, but it's sacred. It's literally like a sacred when we tune into each other and you're holding a space in which you believe that that person can grow and heal and figure something out. Well, that is precipitating that possibility within that person. And in terms of like the interconnectedness of everything, I mean, I've had so many experiences myself as a very kind of intuitive, highly sensitive person where, so my sister and I, like, we're very connected to the
Mhm.
point where she lives in California, so it's quite a ways away from where I am. I mean, it's like, I don't know, long ways. And if I'm mad at her, she knows I'm mad at her. She can feel it, right? And I remember getting a car accident when I was 19, and my dad that night he was actually he was at a PhD event. He was doing his PhD later in life, and he had like a nightmare that night, like something really bad had happened. And I have connections with a couple of good friends now, where it's literally like they'll reach out to me and say, "Are you okay?" Or and it's like, "Well, no, actually, something bad." Like, so this intuitive kind of soup that we live within, it's real. I mean, I mean, I have so many experiences now, so much kind of evidence, quote unquote. It's just like I can't deny it. And as I continue to kind of accept it and develop those abilities and those skills, I actually become more attuned to it all.
Mm.
So who knows where things are going to be in 6 months or in a year? It's I mean, in some ways it feels magical and miraculous, what has kind of ensued. And I guess not super in line with your kind of question there, and I'm kind of going on tangents. I hope that's okay. But since I've started this process of really intently working with energy and working with a shaman and also developing some of those abilities for myself, like the people close to me are just have noticed I've become a different person.
Mhm.
So like my wife, for example, she's like, I mean, she's always thought I'm a little bit out there, quite frankly. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But she's just like, you're so much more calm and you're so much more loving and you're not as reactive as you used to get. I used to have like really strong, like I have a strong, intense emotional overexcitability, and it would get the best of me. And doing these practices has calmed my nervous system.
Yeah.
Um, I feel a much stronger connection with my children. And so there's like, all of these relational connections and ripple effects of this work. It almost seems like kind of magical, because in psychological kind of tools and processes, a lot of this stuff would take a lot longer and be much more difficult. Um, so when I reflect on my own experience, I just feel like very grateful. And I think my I think my wife is mostly grateful, although it's complicated because I'm a complicated person. So,
No,
but it's,
but
yeah,
it's
it's just
beautiful.
amazing. Yes. Yeah, it is
And
beautiful.
it's beautiful. And I can relate to this so much,
Yes.
because I would be like very, I would have like very strong emotional overexcitability as well. But like I said, I
Yes.
would have like these blockages inside of me. So it would build up, and then it would be like a tsunami, like
Yeah.
going over me. And um, people would like say, they would shout things at me like, you're probably borderline, or you're probably manic,
Hmm.
or things like that. And I was just talking about this with one of my friends the other day,
Hmm.
and she also
Hmm.
said, she said, you've changed during the past year.
Hmm.
You've really changed. And I'm like, yeah, I have changed, but that's because it's not building up anymore. It's
Hmm.
flowing. And if it's flowing, then it just feels warm. And I experience the same
Hmm.
emotional intensity, but it doesn't build up. It's not overwhelming anymore. So I can also enjoy it far more
Yes.
than I ever could. And also have like better connections with the people around me, but also like the people not even around me. Like you feel connected
Yes.
um, to everything, to nature, to um, and like there's no linear um,
Hmm.
thing as well. Like there's no time. There's no. You just feel connected to everything. I know that sounds like, to people listening to it, it was like, what is she talking about? It sounds really out there, but it's made such a difference in my life. I feel so much more, satisfied, at peace, happy, and connected to the people around me. So I'm just grateful for everything I've been through in the past year. And so I can absolutely relate to what you're saying, because it's made my relationships with other people like so much better, better as well. And before that, the thing that you were saying about being able to, uh,
Hmm.
read people's energy from afar. Um, I have like friends who live like in the south of the Netherlands, and whenever like something's wrong with them, I just feel it, and I send them a text like, "Are you okay? And is everything okay?" And she used to have this friend, and this friend, he's like he's really gifted scientific guy.
Yes.
Um, and he felt really threatened by that. Like, how can
Hmm.
you how can you know? How can you read my energy and be right? Like it would feel like really, really
Hmm.
vulnerable. It would make
It
me
is
feel really,
vulnerable.
really vulnerable that people could.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, yeah, but I also have to be careful with what I say, because I don't want to make people like feel vulnerable, but I do want to check in whether they're okay, because I want to be there for them as well. So that was like a bit of a
Yes.
yeah process for me to search, what feels right for people. To I can't. I'm not going to look inside your soul. I just want to know whether you are okay, and
Yes.
whether I can do something for you, whether I
Yeah.
can help you. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're pointing there too is kind of like, I think it's important, like a certain kind of ethical principles, right? When you have some of these abilities, or this energy sensitivity, is, honoring people's boundaries and privacy.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we get intuitive flashes about things. I get flashes about
Mm-hmm.
people all the time. And if they're close to me, I might share that with them, as an act of kind of just, if that relationship is that type of. And other times it's like there's a certain sense, just like with psychology, we talk a lot about boundaries, right? It's like there's a certain, it's like it can feel very violating if you just like peer into somebody's soul and then shove it in their face, right? Like that's not
Absolutely.
right. And so yeah, there's a certain way of kind of having these abilities and using them for the good and using them for loving ways, because people, people do sometimes have these types of skills and use them for nefarious purposes.
Yeah.
And there is darkness, and like it's not all love and light. There's the other, so the shadow side of all of these things, which when you're energy sensitive, and I'm not sure if you have these kind of experiences, Maria, but sometimes I feel the darkness, and I can kind of experience the darkness from another person, and I can see what they've been through, and it's very dark, and sometimes when I feel that, it's like I wish I could just turn the sensitivity off.
Yes.
And I mean, you can do practices to kind of clear things out, but being very permeable and very sensitive, energetically as well as emotionally, makes for a very incredibly rich and nuanced and complex life. It also leads to certain susceptibilities and certain environments you can't tolerate. I know for myself, like going to school and being in the conventional kind of education system, I don't think I was ever, like, I was intelligent enough to do well, but I think I was so overcome by everything that was happening around me, the teacher's energy, the what other students were kind of talking about, that I couldn't actually like be fully present in my body and in my experience. And I didn't even know what was happening because there was no language around this type of stuff. But I think I spent most of my educational tenure somewhat dissociated just to cope with the sensitivity. And thankfully I was intelligent enough, or had the mental wherewithal to be able to still kind of perform at a certain level. But I thought, man, there's something wrong with me here. Like nobody else is feeling this. All of my kind of, my guy friends who I played sports with, for example, they didn't seem to have any of this stuff. And I eventually, when I was growing up, I just kind of shut it off. I just collapsed down because there was no space for it. And it caused me a lot of suffering. And I didn't consciously do it. It was an unconscious kind of coping mechanism. But in shutting that off, I shut myself off, because that is the very central organizing principle of what it means to be me in the world. And so I had, from age 15 to age 25, basically, I had completely shut this aspect of my experience down. And I could function, I don't know how, as a bit of an automaton, just kind of living through adaptations and things like that. And for me, it was the birth of my daughter. And I think I described that in the Positive Disintegration podcast, when my daughter was born when I was 25, and she popped out. She was unexpectedly born at home quite quickly, so she literally kind of just popped out. And I got to hold her. And man, she has like wonderful just energy, and it just kind of like shocked me awake. It's like, okay, I got to deal with whatever's going on here. And I'm 39 now. That's 14 years ago. And it's been a journey of kind of reclaiming parts of myself and healing wounds and growing in knowledge and growing in the types of things that I'm doing in the world. And I feel like I've kind of come full circle. I've come back home, because I mean, one thing that my parents would always say about me as a kid is I was just content to kind of sit and observe. And there's lots of pictures of me. I always sat with my hands folded neatly on my lap, just kind of, because what I was observing all of the intricacies of everything around me. And they called me like little Yoda, because I just kind of sit there and just be kind of observing everything in this wise and they didn't really know what to do with it. But that part of me, like, that got shut down and squashed through a whole bunch of experiences, and got reawakened when I was 25. And now I feel like in a lot of ways I've come back to that sense of wholeness. And it's not, and still now, I mean, it's not easy to be that type of a person in the world and have that type of sensitivity. It means I have to have certain kind of accommodations with the work that I do. Like I have my own kind of private office here that I'm able to have kind of a certain amount of control around. If I have too much interaction with a lot of people over time, it's too much energetically. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to create a habitat for myself in which my natural way of being in the world is is not only kind of enabled, it's actually kind of celebrated. And because I've been able to kind of create that habitat for myself, and I'm very thankful I have, not everybody has that, and that's a terrible tragedy, quite frankly. I'm also able to then offer that to other people. And to the people listening, is like, if you've had these kinds of experiences and you're very sensitive, and sometimes you feel like you're a little bit crazy, or you don't even know who you are because you absorb energy from everything and you get confused about things, just know you're not alone. There's other people like you, and there are increasingly practitioners out there that might be able to help you and provide guidance and insights for you. There's nothing wrong with you.
Beautiful, isn't it? And there is nothing wrong with
No.
being like this, but there's also a lot of like collective trauma around this. I mean, it's been going on for centuries and centuries.
Yes.
Telling, people, I was going to say people like us, that there is something, quote unquote, wrong, but there's not.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful and so fulfilling if you embrace this. Beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
One of the things that you were talking about at the start of the podcast was the shamanic practices, and you mentioned like the lower world, middle world, and the upper
Yes.
worlds. I think that also might be a new concept for people. I mean, with the energy work, people can understand, because when people come into a room, I'm like, did you ever walk into a room and you feel, what people are thinking, or whether there's just been a fight, and then people are like, yeah, I can feel that. Like, okay, well, then you already are like sensitive to energy. And then people, they can relate to their own experiences, so they can accept that it's real and that it exists, and that they experience that as well. But I think, for like other like shamanic practices, I don't think that people are that familiar with it, like from their own experiences. So could you share a little bit about that as well?
Of course. Yeah, of course. So I started kind of exploring shamanism in depth about a year and a half ago now. And it originally came to me in kind of interacting with a shamanistic practitioner, who then used various tools like tarot, just energy reading, to kind of guide me and help me. And so I've read a lot of books on shamanism at this point. And it's important to talk about like some of the cultural appropriation pieces of things, because like, here I am, like a white European dude, who, I mean, my historical kind of, indigenous kind of background would have been in modern day Europe somewhere. Shamanistic practices, they bubbled up in all different cultures across time.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at all of these different practices, and they're all unique in their own ways. And what's neat about shamanism is it's not like a doctrine. It's not like a set of beliefs that you just buy into. It's ever evolving and changing depending on the context that you're in. And so he saw all of these different cultures and how they talk and how they practice shamanism, and he took out the core elements kind of that he found in common amongst all of them. And so core shamanism is like a little bit like kind of like a condensed version of what shamanism is, and then it can be kind of developed for a particular person in whatever way it works for them. And that's what the beautiful thing about shamanism is it's about your personal experience. It's not somebody telling you to do something or somebody saying this is how it should be. It's about your experience, and your experience is valid, and your experience is going to be unique. All of those types of practices are ways of journeying beyond our kind of conventional consensus reality, which is called the middle world.
Yes.
And the middle world is our world of like, things are kind of very, dense, like matter is dense. Things are physically kind of present. There's relationships, there's your mind, there's your physiology. All of those are parts of the middle world. But the shamanic worldview is that that's only one aspect of reality. There's other dimensions of existence that we can actually access and travel to. Different people will say, well, those are different kind of forms of consciousness, not necessarily actual places. I'm fairly convinced at this point, like, that there are actually other dimensions of experience that we can access. They're not just kind of imagined places. And so the lower world is the world of kind of unspoiled nature. It's like Mother Earth before humans kind of ransacked her over the past, several thousand years in particular. And we can go to the lower world on a journey, and it's a perfectly safe and loving place. So it's like you can go there. It's kind of like a dream in a little ways. Like, we all have dreams, or most of us do. It's like you're going on a dream, but it's like an active dream. It's like you're kind of entering this kind of experience. It's a bit of a lucid dream, one might say.
Yes.
So I might say, I would, and I have guides that and what guides are just forms of energy that I've developed kind of a relationship with and put certain characteristics onto that make them feel personable to me. And so I have a couple of guides that are always looking out for me. It's a wonderful thing. It's like, you're never alone, like literally never alone. But we can go down to the lower world and we can say, oh man, like, let's just say you're feeling really lost. And okay, well, you can go on a journey to the lower world and you can ask for guidance. And so you go with an intention. You set your intention of saying, okay, I'm going to go on this dream journey. And I would like guidance, and can you help me, please? And you go into this altered state of consciousness. Some people can do it at will. Some people, use a drum or use other kind of substances to access that. And you have experiences. They could be visual. They could be more of a felt sense. Could be auditory. But you have these encounters and experiences. And anybody who's worked with dreams knows that whether you believe that dreams are just kind of like, mental kind of processing that's just kind of random or not, if you start paying attention to your dreams, you'll start realizing there's patterns of things that your dreams are trying to tell you. And I've done a lot of dream work historically, but it's a similar thing with the journey. And so you'll go down, and when you start going down to the lower world, it's a place that you're going to, and when I go down to my lower world place, like, it's a literal, it has a geography to it, has a topography, it has certain natural elements in different places. There's an encampment of indigenous humans that are there, that are kind of my tribe, and I can go down there anytime really, and I could just ask for guidance or love or support, and yeah, it's like a perfectly safe and loving place, and maybe your guides will give you a big hug, or you'll do some type of a ceremony down there, or have an encounter with an animal, and you'll come back from that a changed person. I mean, it sounds a little bit outlandish in some ways, but it's like, you've let go of something, you've been reformed as something new, and this is a tool that we can use, and you can always go back. So that's the lower world, and then there's the upper world, which is like, it's imagined like kind of going up, right? And so Christianity, for example, which is often described as a sky religion, it's very focused on the upper world and the realm of deities and kind of spiritual masters. The experience of the upper world is often kind of very ethereal and very, it's not very solid necessarily. It's kind of, it's very light, kind of almost cloud-like in some ways. And you, just like you can go down to the lower world, you can go up to the upper world to maybe ask questions of a spiritual master. Certain entities are up there, like Jesus Christ, for example. Well, you can go and literally connect with Jesus if you'd like to. I mean, that might sound a little bit strange, but it's right there. And so if you're feeling lost, humans have always felt lost at times. Like, this is part of the human experiences. And this is why shamanism, which is the world's oldest spiritual tradition, was developed, because it helps us learn what it means to be us as individual humans, to find our soul, to find our true purpose in the world, to find our true identity. It also provides a bit of a solace from the complexities of middle world reality. Sometimes it's too much, right? And going to the upper world or going to the lower world and having a bit of a break and getting replenished there can be a matter of like life and death, or kind of, severe psychological distress or not. Um, and so, yeah, so these practices and these tools, from a therapeutic standpoint, it's like you've just expanded the context and the potential of human life and human experience and the therapeutic encounter to basically from like, something very narrow and kind of rigid to something hugely expansive and powerful. Um, so I guess, yeah, that's a bit of like a Cole's Notes kind of version of the different kind of upper world and middle world and lower world, and none of them are better than any others. Like, oftentimes spiritual people will want to escape from the middle world, right? Or kind of bypass like emotional suffering or problems in the world. Well, that's not good, because that's a legitimate and important part of our experience. But conversely, if all you're doing is living in this very narrow band of what it means to be human, my oh my, are you missing out on what it truly means to be a human being. Yeah, and the possibilities for growth and healing are just like in some ways limitless.
Beautiful. Like you said, if you're just in this whole like human experience world as we know it, because I think that those other worlds are also part of the
Oh
human
yes,
experience, but it's
yes,
just not the part that we're used to anymore. We've basically
yeah,
confined ourselves within this small
yeah.
layer that you're talking about, and it
And
feels so
I also,
free.
sorry to interrupt, Maria, but
No, that's all
I
right.
also think it's important to mention, like, these aren't like other like, these are other dimensions of the same reality that we're in now. So you're not escaping to some like, no, it's like literally, if you think about there being different dimensions of reality or different layers of reality. So if you think about like the spectrum of light, the light spectrum, right? There's the visible spectrum that we can see, and then there's further infrared and ultraviolet spectrums that other creatures can see, but we can't, right? It's the same idea with the different worlds. It's like it's just other layers of the same exact place that you are, that are just a little bit more subtle, and a little bit like it takes a certain kind of sensitivity and a certain kind of practice to start paying attention to those things. So it's not like you're going off to some other place. No, it's all here right now. Well, and then when I mention that time too, everything's kind of right here and right now as well. But that's a bit of another kind of can of worms to open.
Mm-hmm.
But 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 what also brought to mind as you were talking is, for those of us who have these kinds of experiences, I remember being so lost existentially, because my experience did not match up with anything I could read about, or anything I mean, I wasn't familiar with shamanism at the time, but anything I was reading, it was like it was always missing the mark a little bit. There were
Mm.
certain things
Yeah.
that resonated with me, like giftedness or high sensitivity. And I feel like in discovering energy work and shamanism, I feel like I've come home, because I feel like I don't even know how to really describe it, other than I feel like I'm at home. It's feel like, oh, so this is why I didn't feel like I belong, because I don't really belong just to this dimensionality. I belong to all of these other pieces as well. And the reason I felt so lost is because I was lost. But it was right
Yes.
here. It was right here all along. I just had to, I just had to come across, the right time to kind of discover that. Um, and I'm tempted to kind of to go even more deep into some of the academic study I've done with eco psychology. And so I've done a PhD in the field of eco psychology, and I studied how do gifted adults experience ecological self, which is a sense of
Mm-hmm.
self which is much more expansive, right? It's kind of like recognizing you're one with everything else, and kind of recognizing that that kind of real spiritual experience that people can often have in nature. So I was doing this hardcore academic study for years on this topic, and I was obsessed with it. And I devoured everything on it. And I didn't even realize until, after I graduated, that really what I was searching for and what I was so passionate about was what I have found now, which is that it's not through my mind, not through this big brain that I have, that I'm going to find what I'm looking for. It's through my felt sense and my heart and my experience that I'm going to find what I'm looking for. Not to say that the brain's bad, but it just shouldn't be in the lead, from my
Yes.
perspective. It's like the heart should be in the lead. And if we could lead with heart and love, we live in a very different world. And my sense is that that's shifting slowly, and it's ebbing back and forth to kind of close-heartedness and open-heartedness and back and forth, and it's complex and confusing. But that's my hope, is that we can all learn to love ourselves a bit more,
Mm.
to love each other a bit more, and then to love Mother Earth, to love these creatures that we share this world with, to give back and to try to help them in their suffering, because there's so much free love that nature just gives to us continuously. She just gives and gives and gives. And so for so long, humans have just taken and taken and taken. And we're all suffering because of that. And so, yeah, and so it's just my hope that we can learn to live in a right relationship. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So,
Yeah. One of the last things I'm going to comment on, because I could keep on commenting on everything
yeah,
you've got to
yeah,
say.
for sure.
I'm sure that we could talk for hours. But one of the things that was going through my mind, where you were talking about the research that you were doing,
Yeah.
and you were taking it from like a cognitive perspective to see, whether there was a connection there.
Yeah.
You Within your research question, there's already the question of whether there's a correlation between being gifted and the way you experience nature and energy
Yeah.
there. But it didn't feel fulfilled. So was it that you already felt you were searching for yourself for a connection there that you didn't really find until you like really fully
Absolutely.
experienced it on all levels? Beautiful.
Absolutely. And so I was leading with my head. And that's where I felt safest too, right? Like that's what I
Mm-hmm.
developed most. And what was lovely about my master's and then my PhD work is that, well, I'm talking about nature with people all the time. I'm studying about nature, so I'm having this wonderful like obsession with spending time in nature and understanding it. And so it was feeding me viscerally, but I didn't understand like that what I was looking for was already happening.
Yes.
It's like because my mind would not accept like, and I'll just give like a quick example of this is, you know, in psychology and a lot of the theoretical frameworks I was working with, there's a sense of like, you can't just get information. You can't just get information from something. That's projection. You're projecting onto that thing what you're sensing from it. And I remember just being so perplexed by this because I'm like, okay, so sometimes I project for sure. I'm projecting sometimes my own personal stuff or my own states. But almost my entire life has been absorbing things from people, absorbing things from places, absorbing things from plants. And the frameworks that I'm working with in the literature that I'm saying is telling me like that I'm just making that up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, what the heck? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And there was a conscious and an unconscious wrestling with that for a long time. So when I finished my PhD and the day that I defended my PhD, and this was like just a really interesting kind of synchronicity, because in retrospect, my guides are very happy that I did that because again, people think I must
Yes.
not completely crazy because I have a PhD. My two favorite bands of all time, like kind of growing up, were playing a concert together, like 45 minutes from where I was defending my my PhD thesis. It was like they've never toured together before. It was almost like, here's your reward for all that hard work and searching. Now relax a little bit, embrace your experience and share that with other people and help other people. And you know, that was in 2019, and subsequently it's just been this, it's just gotten better. Mostly, I mean, there's obviously lots of suffering and stuff that happens concurrent with all of these kind of awarenesses, but it's all part of something good. That even when things are difficult, even when you're feeling the darkness, even when you're healing from your own trauma and experiencing it kind of viscerally, like that is part of this wonder. You're facing difficult things, and this is where kind of some of Dabrowski's ideas come into. Like you're facing what is difficult, and you're choosing to kind of to want to be a better person, and that has ripple effects, again, like as I mentioned earlier, that we can't really comprehend. And so if you're struggling, again, people listening, if you're struggling, don't stop fighting. Don't stop searching, because eventually you will find your answer. It just might be in a place you didn't imagine it would be. So.
Absolutely. And everything's a journey. Like you started with asking those questions for your research. And basically this is the next level, the next step within your own journey, finding and experiencing those answers that you were searching for back then.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then that'll continue, and that'll evolve, and it'll be like, that's life. Life is continuously like a river that's flowing. It's always changing and always shifting. And one thing that our brains do is it takes these little snapshots and tries to hold on to them, right? Because it makes us feel in control and secure. But life is a continuous growth process, and you know, that's both overwhelming in some ways. It's also incredibly exciting because you never get bored, and there's always something to kind of learn, and something to heal, and something to kind of work towards. I just at this point, kind of in my life, I'm just really grateful, even though a lot of my experiences have not been easy, and even though in a lot of ways I live a relatively privileged life, I'm just grateful for all of it, even the childhood trauma that I went through. Because if it wasn't, and I don't mean to say like trauma is a good thing by any means, but you know, when you can come to a place of recognizing that, you know, in some ways, if it wasn't for that trauma that I went through, I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't be able to connect with people the way that I do, and I wouldn't be able to love as well. And to me, I'm just kind of like, I'm grateful that that I was able to harvest some gems from what often just felt like an absolute prison. And so in that prison again, and I just feel compelled to kind of say this, if you're in one of those prisons, or you're feeling trapped in a school setting or in a work setting, just know that it won't continue forever, and that there are solutions, and just don't give up. Just don't give up. So.
Beautiful. Eric, I really want to thank you for this beautiful and deep conversation. I think it was amazing, and I'm sure that it will benefit a lot of people listening out there who are asking the same questions, and who are trying to embrace this part of themselves, and maybe struggling with things that they're experiencing and they're going through. So I really want to thank you for having this conversation, and for helping me get this message out there as well, just to make sure that people realize that they're allowed to embrace this part of themselves as well, and to treasure it, because I think it's wonderful that more and more people are finding this part of themselves. I just want to know it's okay, because there's nothing wrong with you, like you said. Yes. Thank you. Is there anything else that we haven't touched upon in our conversation that you would still like to share? We've talked about a lot of things, but
I mean, there's probably 10,000 other things to kind of talk about, but no, I get a sense of, no, I feel like this feels complete. It feels good.
Yes.
So, and
yes.
again, thank you, Maria, for having me, and for sharing your own journey and your kind of that heartfelt connection that you felt through through what I was sharing. And I just thank you for being you in the world as well. So
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you for being you.
Dit was weer een aflevering van Een Intense Reis, de podcast. Fijn dat je luisterde. Heb je naar aanleiding van deze aflevering behoefte aan hulp of begeleiding? Via www.eenintensereis.nl help ik je graag verder. Op deze site vind je ook meer informatie over mijn boek Een Intense Reis.
Luister je graag naar deze podcast? Laat de maker weten dat je waardeert wat hij of zij doet en geef een digitale fooi. Dat kan zonder abonnement, snel en simpel via fooiepot.com. Fooiepot met een d.com